I was in an immediate crisis. You know, people say, well, you don't, people, nobody goes vegan overnight. I did. I did.
Media. So thank you very much for joining us. I was hoping that maybe we could get started if you could just quickly introduce yourself, let the folks know who you are, and then we'll ease into the first question, which is what led you to this focus on intersections of gender and species?
Well, thank you. And it's great to be here and doing this with you. Really excited about doing this today. And so just want to express that gratitude to you before we start off. So my name is Lee Hall. Uh, I am a lawyer, and that is because of my interest in making things better for non-human beings in the world. Really, that's how I came to that. So I did get a second law degree in environmental law with a focus on climate change because, you know, that's where we are right now. Um, so that's me. But I wouldn't say that the interest in law has defined me. And I think you'll see that uh, as this conversation unfolds. I could say one more thing, and that's where I'm coming from here, where we're zooming in from. I am just outside of, I'm in the United States. I'm in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia area, and I'm just outside Valley Forge National Historical Park. So that is the place that I go to refresh my soul and to hear the birds, to be with the trees and the deer who are unfortunately always under attack. So it's kind of like life. It's bittersweet. The places that are most important can be the places that hurt the most. That's why we need feminism. That's why we need animal liberation.
Wait, so the George Washington reenactor that hangs out in that place is not going to be our savior. Is it? There's still a reenactor that hangs out there.
There's this history stuff in there and a lot of people in costumes. Yes, there is. I don't think they notice
No.
the the wood thrushes or the coyotes or the deer.
Coyotes there, amazing.
There are coyotes there. And where we are, this is the mid-Atlantic region of the United States. We used to have wolves in this area a long time ago, but they've been extirpated. So there aren't any wolves in Pennsylvania, but there sort of are because nature, in its fantastic capability and resilience and capability and resistance, has made it so the coyotes have risen into the position of what the scientists would call apex predator. And on the way, some of the DNA from the wolves up in the Midwest, up in Canada, has made its way through the coyotes down here. So now we have what's called eastern coyotes, and they've got wolf DNA. And so they are capable of continuing the balance of nature. And so, you know, one of the things that I like to make clear in deer advocacy is that there are natural controls in the biocommunity itself. We don't have to exert that kind of authority on the deer. Uh, and a lot of advocates even don't want to hear that. I mean, why are you telling people about coyotes? uh, they get nervous about that. And I think that a lot of advocates mistrust animals and the way they control their own numbers. And so I think coyotes may be a little frightening to animal advocates as well. So what generally happens with deer advocacy is you have advocates saying, well, let's just put them on birth control. Like, let's not advocate for coyotes to curb their natural population. That sounds like it's, and people are going to resent us, right? For advocating for coyotes, particularly if they find out that there's wolf DNA in coyotes. Oh my gosh. So why don't we just put them on birth control? And then you see the idea of advocacy as something that really never gets out of its paternalistic mindset. It treats the deer as though they were the feral cats you rescued, which you would go and have the cats neutered because they can't live in nature, and it's the best thing for them. But that's paternalistic. Once we deal with domesticated animals, we have to bring in an ethic of care. They're dependent because they're domesticated. But if we look at deer in that same way and say, we're going to interfere with their natural reproductive systems, then we do the opposite of animal liberation. We look at all free animals as though we were their stewards, as opposed to realizing that animals in nature are their own true stewards. And we need to let them self-steward.
Almost a colonialist logic, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, it is. And it treats biocommunity. Yes, I mean, you've got people coming in, they're controlling nature, they're taking out anyone who would resist, who, in this case would be the coyotes and the wolves and the bobcats. We have bobcats here. They are here. The amount of trapping and killing of the natural carnivores of this region is just off the charts. Coyotes, the population of coyotes in Pennsylvania is about 100,000. Every year, I believe the hunters and trappers take out 50,000. So, and they like to, it looks like, I mean, it appears as though they like to take all of them out, but they get as many as they can. So what they do is they're interfering in the dynamic of what coyotes' capabilities are. The places where the deer are most irritating to humans is where they take out, the most of the natural. Those are the places, the suburbs, right, where people don't want deer eating their azaleas. And so the authorities go. They're taking out coyotes in that same area. Of course, the deer they're filling vacuum, right? The deer are multiplying. Sure, they are. A lot of deer here. And so what do people do is then they go out and they kill the deer too, after killing the coyotes and the bobcats. With the coyotes, there's hunting and trapping allowed all year round, no limit. So they could keep going and going. So yeah, I mean, is this like colonialism? Yes, it is. It's human beings staking out their territory and not letting any living communities get too uppity. Complete control and often extirpation of the living communities who were here, indeed.
So it's like the history of vegan feminism, I think a lot of folks won't be aware, actually is rooted in this environmental critique of mainstream environmentalism, this very, as you said, paternalistic sort of desire to control, manage, so nature and animals within it have not been able to manage themselves.
Mm.
So would you say that maybe is where your vegan feminism is rooted in, is coming from that ecofeminist heritage? Do you identify as an ecofeminist?
I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what brought this on? So was it a law degree in climate justice, or was it something further than that?
That didn't bring this on. My veganism led, and my feminism combined. So when I say veganism, I mean feminism, um, led me to law, but it didn't start there. for me with animal liberation. It was before that. It was 1983 that I realized the connection between feminism and veganism, feminism and animal liberation. And the reason it wasn't until 1983, I was about to turn 22 years old, I had never heard the word veganism, vegan, until 1983, when I met the first vegan I ever met. And we're still friends to this day, Robin Lane, who lives in London. And so meeting this vegan, I had this crisis. I was asking, what does it mean? What is a vegan? I'm trying to wrap my head around somebody who had just become vegan a year ago. Robin's trying to explain to me, and it did it so well that I was in an immediate crisis. People say, well, nobody goes vegan overnight. I did. Because Robin explained this to me in a way that made me realize I was part of a master class.
Mm.
Then I said, how can I call myself a vegan? I mean, how can I call myself a feminist? Because feminism to me is this interrogation of master classes. It's an interrogation of hierarchies where some class is in the position to oppress another class. So if that's how I see feminism, and Robin's explaining to me that as my membership in the Human Club makes me a part of an oppressive class, now I'm in a crisis. What do? I'm going to have to change my life. I am going to have to learn from Robin, who was willing to meet me at work, to come to see where I lived, and to help me make all the changes, including meeting me every day at lunch.
Wow.
But that was it. It was a change begins with questioning the categories we're living in. Feminism taught me that. So when Robin told me it was a false supremacy to be able to wield our authority over other living communities, then I realized, well, veganism is feminism. I told Robin that night. And we've had a long conversation now for all these years about veganism and feminism. But I knew, hunting, stalking other animals happens because animals are others. The use of animals in labs happens because bioethicists have told scientists humans occupy a higher rung on basically what's a great chain of being. And you wonder about that because science knows that evolution tells us one group of animals emerges from the last. So there's a continuum in animal life. So it's kind of bizarre that scientists would accept human supremacy, but they do. They're part of the Human Club. And veganism makes me conscious that I'm a card-carrying member of the Human Club. And I think that it's up to me to challenge that. So I want to blur that boundary. I am a human primate. I'm a human. I'm also a primate. I'm a member of the greater animal community. And so then my activism isn't just charity and it's not just chivalry. Because I am you, I struggle for you.
Yeah, I think that's a bit, maybe I'll find out otherwise through this research, but I think it's quite rare to come into veganism from the feminist route at the very beginning, to have it explained to you in that way. So that's pretty unique and pretty awesome. And
Well,
also,
that's how I heard it. I don't think Robin explained it to me in that way that here, this is feminism. You can't be a feminist if you're not a vegan. Robin didn't say that, but I heard it
okay.
in Robin's description of how we use animals. It was the holidays were coming up, and Robin was passing out. I was at a rock concert, which I never saw because we stood out in the hallway the whole time. So I only heard the Poison Girls if somebody was opening the door to go in or out. So we were both there to hear to hear the band, but we didn't do it because I had to hear what Robin had to say. So, gosh, I'm thankful I'm a feminist because that's how I heard it. That's
Yeah.
how I heard what Robin had to say. And because I'm a feminist, I understood that oppression, I had to jump right into it. I couldn't say, oh, maybe I'll look for animal products from farms where animals are raised in a certain way that's more humane or more environmentally, less environmentally detrimental. Maybe I'll do these kinds of things. Maybe it's one step at a time. I'll pick one step and then I'll pick another. I just said, I don't want to be a member of the master class. Full
Yeah.
stop. Like, how do I get out of this? I want to escape it right away. Help me do it. What's the vegan? What do I do?
So what did you do next? So you became a vegan, and then, I mean, how I know you is through your vegan feminism. I remember many years ago you were on a Vegan Freak podcast about capers of the churchyard, and that's how I came to know your work. I was listening to
Okay.
the interview, and it was a feminist critique, and that was one of the first feminist critiques I had heard. Um, so 1983, I have to admit, like that's the year I was born. So you
Well,
have this like much longer history of what shapes that feminist critique from a vegan lens. And so what are the things that you have noticed over the decades really that have really informed that? What are some of the important issues? You've noted quite a bit. You've noted the environmental paternalism, sort of the colonial logic there, even scientific arrogance, paternalism again. Um, and the issues with happy meat. With that was also intriguing. I wonder if in the early 80s, if that was such a readily available counterframe for people who are resistant to vegans. So I feel like that may have been a little bit more in the 90s. Or so what do you think? What are some of the major issues for vegan feminism over the past decades?
well, in the 80s, there was the humane.
Yeah.
I was in England when I met Robin, and cage-free eggs were a thing. Yes. Um, Veganism was not really heard of much. I mean, the Vegan Society in England was started in 1944, so we're talking about 40 years into it. It was still new, and back then there were some really peculiar. There was something called sauce mix, which was a sausage
Not
making.
that. Yeah. Tim Stoller is always talking about it in any interview.
That was, uh, but there was also Indian food, and it was possible to go get for pennies. It was possible to go and get Hindu food, and the restaurants, the people who ran the Indian restaurants were very, very careful because they took it as a spiritual. But it was very important to understand where the customer was coming from in terms of ingredients. It was no joke, right? So you could get a big bag of pakora or all kinds of uh, food, samosas, and uh, then to me I thought, well, this is how I should learn to cook. I should learn to cook Indian food. This is what I should do. Going back to feminism, I think like rather than the mix, right? Let's take a journey into this culinary art where I wasn't a cook. I wasn't interested in that sort of thing, but now I was. So and I think that all through the years there's been a thread of this. I think you have this pull in now the vegan movement where let's have a mix, let's have lab grown meat, or let's have meat substitute. I'm not knocking meat substitutes. Lab grown meat, I have big concerns about. Uh, but what you don't hear so much is this pull to simplicity, right? Like what lentils? Can I like why do people laugh when I like lentils is such a big part of the vegan feminist the whole ideal
Right.
is that we're going to empower simple people who that's who we are, simple primates, and we're going to eat simple foods and we're going to skip all the complexity that brought in all the technology that wound up oppressing other living beings. We're like the lentil farmers. They're restoring the soil because the lentils fix nitrogen into the ground. So anybody who's done a lot of crop growing for many, many years knows that the soil gets depleted. And what happens is they call in the lentil farmers. And more, I think lentils are coming into their own. These pulses, these foods that we need to sustain ourselves. That's a vegan issue. The whole idea that, a smallholder, a small farmer could grow proteins that are drought resistant, and with climate crisis right now, this is so important, that will keep them from having to migrate, that will keep them from having to buy fertilizers from huge multinational companies. So I guess, always, these years, I've thought about, when you come into veganism, the first thing you do is you relearn how to eat.
Yes. Yeah.
And part of that from a feminist perspective, I think, is seeking simplicity. It's always been that getting our protein and our nutrients through animals is the complex way. It's taking up more space. It's meaning that animals are eating the nutrients and the protein, and then later, after we graze them and slaughter them, then we get the protein out of their bodies, whereas we could eat our protein, our nutrients directly from the crops. And that would take out a whole layer of authoritarian technological prowess that allows these huge animal agribusinesses to basically run the food systems.
Yeah. And it's interesting. You started out also talking about just kind of getting agency over the food that you eat, because I know in the 70s and the 80s, a big part of the feminist movement was opening up restaurants that were safe places for women, queer folks to meet. And also almost always they would be vegetarian, if not leaning towards vegan. And I think that even today, that's fascinating that you bring up the fact that this highly rationalized, highly capitalistic sort of food industry, even the vegan bit, it's like we're getting away from these simple, available, affordable, global foods. And I do think that there is a patriarchal critique there. I think also a bit of a white supremacist one, because what's your problem with these so-called simple foods that are readily available and affordable and easy to grow and sustainable? Well, why do we need to invest billions and billions into this lab-grown meat stuff when we already have it? So yeah, I think that's an amazing thing to pick out.
Right. And why the put down for simple ways of doing things that can be done by people of any gender, in any climate, in any region of the world? Why this whole idea that we have to bring in fertilizer crops and kind of make farmers dependent on ConAgra and Cargill and all these companies to, yes, it's vegan and it's feminist to critique the global food system. And it's certainly pressing in this time where we're obviously the food system is so completely unsustainable. So I'm glad that there are people who are working on this issue. The impact in emissions that is coming from animal agribusiness, and how important it will be. Some of the research that I've looked at most recently shows that if the global human beings, human community would shift as promptly as possible from a diet based on animal ag to a plant-centered diet, that because of the potency of methane in animal agribusiness and what that does to the atmosphere, that would keep emissions in check for 30 years, which in turn would be enough time to allow the human community to wean itself off of fossil fuels. Isn't that fantastic? So, kudos to the people who are involved in that research and trying to make that heard. We know that fossil fuels are a major culprit in climate crisis, but there's so much less said about the food systems. And that's one of the things that I've been talking about, particularly at Vegan Summerfest, but at every opportunity I can find now for decades. More than 20 years now, I've been talking about the relationship between food and climate crisis. Is this a feminist critique? Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to maybe steer it a little over, but maybe not. We'll see. I wanted to also ask you, I know you have quite a lot to say on major hurdles that you've identified with the animal liberation movement more broadly. I was wondering if you want to kind of discuss those a little bit.
Well, yeah, the major hurdles. I can think of three that come to mind right away. If we're talking about what we need to get past to get into the animal liberation mode, I think a huge one, for starters, is that animal liberation needs to become a goal.
Mm.
So, why are we at the beginning of talking about that? When you look back at early veganism, we're talking about the 1940s and the 1950s, and I'm talking about when the term was coined. Obviously, there are ancient societies and people who were long before the vegan society started in 1944 who knew these things and taught these things. But they said at the beginning that this was about getting ourselves out of the way, stop obstructing the evolution of other animals. That was what it was about. As you put it, colonizing them. That was what this was all about. Today, if you go, I'm going to pick on the Vegan Society in England, because I went over there recently and saw their website. And I know somebody's working very hard on this website, so it's not to diss anybody. But I think we really need to revisit what the Vegan Society, what the principles it was founded on. Because, I'm looking at the website and I'm seeing a campaign called The Future is Vegan. Great. But the graphics are showing me cattle on a field of wildflowers. So when I see that, I'm thinking, well, why is it the first thing I see on the site is domesticated animals and the impression that perhaps they may have a place in a natural, what looks like nature, natural biocommunity, and that's somehow the kind of future we're looking at. We're still seeing cattle, but we're seeing them roam. Now, that to me looks like an animal agribusiness commercial. There is also a video that goes with it.
I've not
I
seen.
think it's done by AI. It's led by Donald Watson, who's not alive anymore, but it's a little like Donald Watson talking doll, like going through, and then you're taking your joystick or your mouse, right? And you're moving through this, what I think it was designed with AI, I would guess. So you're going through and you can ask questions of Donald Watson. And it's okay when you hear about the foods and the foods that vegans eat and don't eat. But then it gets on to the more interesting questions of, say, what will we do with all those animals if we don't eat them? And then Donald Watson, I'm pretty sure, never said that, but gives the answer that, well, they'd be happy. I mean, look at our pets. In fact, the way we treat our pets shows us that humans have the capacity for compassion. No, 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 no. Back in the day when the vegans began the Vegan Society, they had a critique on pet keeping.
Mm.
Now you see the vegan society talking about feeding your cats vegan vegan products. So instead of showing you a critique of purpose breeding animals and making them dependent on us, you see, well, how can you feed them without giving them any animal ingredients? Way off base. So that's number one. I think that our preference for visuals and for talking points that have landscapes that are developed by ourselves, the humans, and animals that have been bred by ourselves. To have the focus on that needs to be rethought. We really need to get a grip on ourselves. The second obstacle that comes to mind is, and this again is a feminist issue, is competition amongst advocates. You've got a lot of competition and maybe not enough mutual support and aid in the theory area. So there's competition for developing theories, for coining terms, for gaining followers, for accumulating status, fan clubs. And sometimes the fan clubs will be on social media dissing anybody that doesn't have the same theory as the one who's coined the term that they're all there for. So I think that this idea of branding, actually branding is a very important word because it does come from the branding of animals in agribusiness. But the idea that there are different animal advocacy brands and that they have to compete for supremacy is an issue. And I would say that the third one that comes to my mind is the pessimism. And we all have it. I mean, this is hard. But the idea that nobody else is going to care erodes animal liberation, because what it does is it presses people to dilute the message so that they can come up with something that somebody will care about. I don't think we need to be pessimistic. We are in the midst of multiple social and environmental crises right now. They're converging. And I think that that could tell us, we don't know what the future holds, but let's assume that we're on the verge of a human epiphany, a collective shift in the human mindset. If that's possible, we need to be there. Our heads have to be in that place. Not easy, but I think dealing with this idea that no one's going to go vegan overnight, those kinds of messages, we've got to grapple with that and help each other. I think this is going to take mutual support. In this idea that, as someone once said, another world is possible. Right? Was it Arundhati Roy who said I could hear her breathing? Another world is possible. Another humanity is possible. And I think we're here as animal liberationists to make it possible. I don't see how these crises, the social crisis, you mentioned colonialism. It's in full bloom, colonialism. To interrogate human supremacy is also going to interrogate colonialism and all the oppressions going on socially. So I think we need us. We're on the right track. And we need to be clear that this will happen, that humanity, this primate species that we're in, is possible. For us, it is possible to reclaim who we are, primates, living in habitat, sustained by nature. We can do it. So I feel like I'm kind of in a journey of self-rewilding. That's what I call it now. Yeah. And I think that helps me with the mindset. What am I doing to rewild my life and my mind?
Right. I think that's definitely a feminist issue, is this sort of socialized sense of helplessness or And sometimes you even see that like that nature will be drawn, and well, nature is red in tooth and claw, or it's a dog eat dog world, and that's a very masculine type of or patriarchal type of perspective on it. Whereas
Mhm.
maybe a more feminist one would say, yes, but look at all the symbiosis and the care and compassion that not just humans have, but other species.
Mhm.
Well, Lee, where's your legacy in all these amazing topics and across these decades? What would you say? What was your legacy? And we're going to post some more on the website with for people who want to learn more, because you do have quite a list, which is awesome. So, how would you say, out of all these things, what do you want to be remembered for?
Hmm. Um, I would say the understanding of habitat as the locus of veganism.
Hmm.
I would say their absolute refusal to settle for benign control. Um, and I would say an interrogation of domestication in this movement. One of the things that I love that Jeffrey Moussaieff Mason said in the foreword of my book, and the current version, the newest version of Animal Liberation, on their own terms, on their I'm thinking of Jeffrey, on their own terms, animal liberation for the 21st century. Uh, and the forward by Jeffrey, at one point, Jeffrey says, I'm glad that we're doing this interrogation of domestication, this interrogation of pet keeping in Lee's book. I would go so far, Jeffrey said, as to say that our original sin as humans was domestication. So I think bringing that conversation out into the open, I think would be it. I do think what we're doing right here is it. I think talking about vegan feminism as authentic feminism is it. I think that getting back to liberating ourselves and others, other communities from a master class is it. Because I think that if we change radically, and I do believe that's possible, that the human primates can stop defining ourselves as a group apart, above, entitled. We might learn coexistence on this planet. If we can drop our social categories, if we can drop our master species role, if we can decide to become fair-minded members of the whole community of life on Earth, then if I've contributed to that, I'd love for that to be on my headstone. I mean, I don't know if you can put that in a small. I don't know if I need a headstone, actually. I guess that's part of it, isn't it? Just go back to the earth.